The Cizeta-Moroder V16T. Giorgio Moroder financed the car. Moroder had made his name and his money producing electronic music in the 1970s and 80s. He had won 3 Academy Awards for film scores. He partnered with Claudio Zampoli, a former Lamborghini engineer who had been operating a Ferrari dealership in Los Angeles. Zampoli would handle the engineering. Moroder would provide the capital. The car was built in Modena. The 6.0-liter V16 was assembled by mounting 2 V8 cylinder banks side by side on a common crankshaft, producing 540 horsepower. The body was designed by Marcello Gandini, the same designer responsible for the Lamborghini Countach and the Miura. The target buyer was the Lamborghini owner looking for something more exclusive. Moroder withdrew his financial support in 1991. The reasons were not made fully public. Zampoli continued under the name Cizeta alone. Production became intermittent. The company completed a small number of cars over the following years. Estimates of total production vary between sources. A formal revival was attempted in the early 2000s. It did not result in meaningful production. The factory in Modena closed. The cars that had been completed exist in private collections across the United States and Europe. The Vector Aeromotive W8. Jerry Wiegert spent over a decade building Vector into a car company before the W8 reached production. The original Vector prototype had appeared in 1971. The company had survived through Wiegert's persistence and a succession of investor relationships that never delivered stable funding. The W8 finally entered limited production in 1990. The twin-turbocharged 6.0-liter V8 produced 625 horsepower in a car whose entire design philosophy was borrowed from American aerospace. The cockpit layout referenced the F-14 Tomcat. The bodywork was composite construction. The stated top speed exceeded 240 miles per hour. 19 examples were completed before an Indonesian conglomerate named Megatech acquired Vector in 1993. Megatech had also acquired Lamborghini the previous year. Wiegert was removed from the company he had created. The new ownership redirected Vector's engineering resources toward a different project. W8 production ended immediately. The cars that had been delivered to customers remained on American roads. The company continued under Megatech's control in a form that bore no practical relationship to what Wiegert had built. Megatech's ownership of both Vector and Lamborghini ended within a few years. Lamborghini was subsequently acquired by Audi. Vector produced nothing further.
The de Tomaso Pantera. Alejandro de Tomaso was an Argentine-born racing driver who established a manufacturing operation in Modena in the 1950s. His method was consistent across multiple projects. He would design a car, source mechanical components from an American manufacturer, and sell the result into a market that the American partner could not otherwise access. The Mangusta arrived in 1967 using a 4.7-liter Ford V8. 401 were built. The handling was considered dangerous by the automotive press of the period. Ford ended that arrangement. The Pantera replaced it in 1971. Ford agreed to distribute the Pantera through its Lincoln Mercury dealer network in the United States. The 5.8-liter Ford V8 produced 330 horsepower. Ford sold approximately 5,000 Panteras in the American market before withdrawing in 1974, following warranty complaints and build quality concerns. De Tomaso continued the Pantera independently in the European market for another 2 decades. The deeper problem was structural. De Tomaso had simultaneously acquired Maserati, the Innocenti small tar brand, and the Benelli and Moto Guzzi motorcycle companies. The capital required to operate all 4 was beyond what any of them generated. Maserati was sold to Fiat in 1993 in a transaction that effectively acknowledged De Tomaso's inability to sustain it. Alejandro de Tomaso died in 2003. The company entered bankruptcy shortly afterward. The Pantera had been produced in small numbers almost until his death. The commercial return never matched the resources the enterprise consumed. The Artega GT. Artega was founded in Germany in 2006 with the intention of building a mid-engined sports car for the European market at a price below Ferrari and Porsche. The GT used a 3.6-liter Volkswagen VR6 engine, producing 300 horsepower, mounted behind the two occupants in a chassis designed for handling rather than outright power. The target buyer was the driver who wanted mid-engine dynamics without supercar pricing. Approximately 150 examples were completed between 2008 and 2012. The problem was volume. A car produced in those numbers over 4 years cannot absorb its development costs through sales revenue alone. The tooling, the crash testing program, the regulatory compliance process, and the ongoing manufacturing costs exceeded what 150 transactions at the car's selling price could recover. Artega filed for insolvency in 2012. The assets were acquired. A subsequent revival using the Artega name attempted to produce an electric vehicle under the same branding. That project also failed to reach meaningful production. The original GT remains available on the second-hand market in Germany. The company that built it no longer exists.
The Bristol Cars Fighter. Bristol Cars had been building automobiles in Filton since 1947. The company's origins were in aircraft manufacturing. Every car Bristol produced carried engineering influences from that background. The Fighter was announced in 2004. The 5.9-liter twin-turbocharged Dodge Viper V10 produced figures Bristol declined to publish precisely, stating only that power exceeded 525 horsepower and that a higher specification variant existed. The car's construction used techniques borrowed from Bristol's aerospace background. The price was approximately £230,000. Production was extremely limited. Bristol's sales volume had always been small. The company had operated for decades by building perhaps 150 cars per year and selling them to a loyal British clientele who valued the manufacturer's deliberate distance from mainstream automotive culture. The Fighter's development costs were disproportionate to the revenue Bristol could generate from that customer base. The company entered administration in 2011. A subsequent rescue returned it to operation on a reduced basis. Bristol entered administration a second time in 2020. The Fighter exists in the small number of examples completed before the first collapse. Bristol's closure ended 73 years of continuous production. The Saleen S7. Steve Saleen had built a successful business modifying Ford Mustangs. The S7 was a different proposition entirely. It was a ground-up original design with no relationship to any production vehicle. The 7.0-liter naturally aspirated V8 produced 550 horsepower in a car weighing 1,200 kilograms with a carbon fiber body and a price of $395,000 at launch. A twin-turbocharged variant followed in 2005, producing 750 horsepower and selling for $555,000. Approximately 77 examples were built across both configurations between 2002 and 2006. The development and manufacturing costs of a car built in those numbers at that level of engineering complexity exceeded what the program generated in revenue. Saleen Automotive filed for bankruptcy protection in 2009. The circumstances reflected a combination of the S7 program's sustained impact on the company's capital position and the broader economic conditions of that period. The company was restructured and continued operating in a reduced capacity, focused on the Mustang modification business that had originally established its name. The S7 was not revived. The cars that had been delivered remained with their owners. Several are in regular use at private track events. The Isdera Commendatore 112i. Eberhard Schultz had been a designer at the German tuning company B&B before establishing Isdera in 1982. The name was an acronym derived from Ingenieurbüro for Steel Design and Rennsportfahrzeuge.
His earlier work had included the CW31 concept for Mercedes-Benz, a car that never reached production but established his technical credentials. The Commendatore 112i used a 6.0-liter Mercedes-Benz V12, producing 394 horsepower. The car featured gull-wing doors and a periscope rear-view mirror system integrated into the roofline, in place of conventional external mirrors. It was a single-person engineering operation, producing individual cars to order. 2 Commendatores were completed. The economic reality of a one-man operation building cars individually at this level of engineering complexity meant the program could not sustain itself commercially. The development costs for the V12 installation and the bespoke chassis exceeded what 2 sale transactions could recover. Schultz continued to represent Isdera at various automotive events for a number of years. The company produced nothing further. The 2 completed Commendatores remain among the rarest German cars built in the 1990s.
The Monteverdi Hai 450 SS. Peter Monteverdi was a Swiss businessman who had been importing and selling Ferrari and other Italian cars through his dealership in Basel when he decided to build cars under his own name. The high-speed 375 arrived in 1967. The Hai 450 SS followed in 1970. The name referenced the German word for shark. The 7.0-liter Chrysler Hemi V8 produced 450 horsepower, a figure that placed it among the most powerful road cars available at the time. The mid-engine layout and the body by Pietro Frua gave the car a visual presence that competed directly with Lamborghini. The production volume did not. Monteverdi built the Hai in extremely limited numbers. Estimates of total production range from 4 to 8 examples, depending on the source consulted. The capital required to develop a mid-engine supercar as a sideline to a dealership operation proved impossible to justify against that volume. Monteverdi discontinued the car. He returned the company's focus to importing and dealing. One further attempt to re-enter the high-performance market was made in the 1980s. It also did not reach meaningful production. The Hai examples that exist have each sold at auction for figures substantially above their original transaction price. The Lotec Sirius. Lotec was a German tuning company based in Dülmen that had built its reputation modifying Mercedes-Benz vehicles for customers who required more performance than the factory offered. The Sirius was a departure from that established model. It was designed as an original vehicle built around a single objective: producing the fastest road-legal car in the world at the time of its completion. The twin-turbocharged 5.0-liter Mercedes-Benz V8 was modified to produce 1,350 horsepower. The car was built on a custom aluminum monocoque, with bodywork designed entirely around aerodynamic function. One example was completed. It was commissioned by a buyer in the United Arab Emirates and delivered in 2001 at a reported price of $3.4 million. Lotec announced that additional examples would be built for further buyers. No additional examples were completed. The engineering investment required to develop a car to this specification from the starting position of a tuning operation had absorbed resources that the single transaction did not fully recover. Lotec returned to the Mercedes-Benz modification work that had sustained it before the Sirius project began. The single completed car remains in the Middle East. The Marussia B2. Marussia Motors was founded in Moscow in 2007 by the Russian television personality Nikolai Fomenko and the businessman Efim Ostrovsky. The B1 and B2 were 2- and 3-seat sports cars using a 3.5-liter turbocharged V6 producing 420 horsepower in a car weighing approximately 1,100 kilograms. The B2 was the more focused configuration of the two. The company's ambition extended beyond road car production from an early stage. Marussia acquired the Virgin Formula One team in 2011 and rebranded it under the Marussia name. The Formula One program consumed capital at a rate the road car operation could not generate. Competing in Formula One at the back of the grid requires a minimum annual expenditure that bears no relationship to the revenues available to a manufacturer producing sports cars in limited numbers at the B2's price point.
The road car program effectively ceased as the Formula One operation absorbed available resources. Marussia Motors filed for bankruptcy in 2014. The Formula One team entered administration separately in the same year. The B2 was produced in extremely limited numbers. The road car operation was not revived following the bankruptcy. Fomenko's subsequent business interests did not include returning to automotive manufacturing.